Thank you, Chair. We're now live.
Thanks, Susie. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I know we've got a lot of members, a lot of officers, and a lot of representatives here this morning. So you have to be patient with us if you want to answer any questions or anything. So we'll get started. I'd like to welcome you all this morning to this virtual meeting of the OSB board. Can I remind all participants that normal rules and procedures apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. As we are meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting has been live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Thank you. We'll go straight on to the agenda this morning. Caroline, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Morstan and from Councillor McCabe. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Is there any declarations of interest? Can't see no hands up, so okay. Can we agree with the minutes of the last overview and scrutiny board meeting which was held on the 23rd of March? Can we agree there to reading, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Is that you, Councillor Higgins? Yeah, your hand up, yeah.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Jeanette Walker has
Sorry, Councillor Walker.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm substituting for Councillor Thompson today, and that's so it's her apologies, and I'm substituting for her on her behalf. Okay. I'd like to have that reflected in the minutes. All right, thank you.
Okay, and I'll call you Jeanette. I'll call you Jeanette this morning, Councillor, because we've got two Walkers, Councillors. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeanette. Right. Okay, item number 4 on the agenda is the Executive Forward Work Programme. Can I pass it over to you, Caroline, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just a standard item on the OSB agenda to make members aware of what's coming up on the forward plan, and if members of the board have any questions, we can find the answers to those and get back to the board. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 5. It's school inclusions and a discussion with secondary schools. I'd just like to make a statement, please, about this before we go ahead. As members will be aware, at the last meeting of the OSB, information was provided in respect of school exclusions across Middlesbrough. Given the high rates, members of the board expressed the view that it would be helpful to hear directly from head teachers of secondary schools across the town to understand the issues from their perspective. I know all members of the board are keen to gain absolute assurances that all secondary schools in Middlesbrough are doing everything they can to support children to remain in school and achieve their full potential. Following the meeting, an invite was sent to the appropriate representatives from all secondary schools in Middlesbrough. The head teacher of Untitled City Academy, Andrew Rogers, and the head teacher of River Tees Multi-Academy Trust, Leanne Chilton, I believe I think she's here, is she? Will be in attendance at today's meeting. Unfortunately, the head teachers, trust chief executives from King's Academy, Acklam Grange, Macmillan, Outward Academies and Trinity Catholic Colleges are unable to attend today and offer their sincere apologies to the board. Acklam Grange, Outward Academies and King's Academy have also advised that although they are unable to attend today's meeting, they are very happy to invite members of the board to visit their schools to discuss the issue, and it is hoped that this can be arranged with the board's approval in advance of the next OSB meeting, which is scheduled to be held on the 11th of May. In addition to an invite was sent to the Regional Schools Commissioner for the Department of Education, their Deputy Kim Mitchell and colleague Paul McKinley are therefore in attendance to give their views on the high rate of school exclusions and provide an insight to their experiences across the region. I appreciate it is disappointing for us all that more schools representatives are unable to attend today's meeting. However, I'd like to request that As a board, we agree to undertake visit opportunities we have been offered by our schools, and these will be arranged at the earliest opportunities. Thank you for listening to that. It was a bit long, but after saying that, I'm not sure whether Rob wants to come in before we start the representations with the certain schools that are attending.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had a data presentation that's been circulated in advance, and I'm very happy to go through that if members think that would be useful. However, if people have viewed that in advance, the perspective that I kind of wanted to draw attention to was that we've had a discussion about the data and the practices within the local authority in the first iteration of OSB. In this iteration of OSB, we're seeking the views of schools, and we've got Andy and Leanne along, who will talk about kind of the best practice and the management of the process of exclusions. And then, as the chair's just pointed out, the subset of today's meeting will be a visit to some of our schools to look at the behaviour practices and the management of such within the schools. So the local authorities here to take any questions or provide any guidance to members in understanding this better. However, we've also got, as you pointed out, Chair, members of the Regional Schools Commissioners group, which is the Deputy Director and a colleague. So they fund the school direct, or fund the schools that we're talking about, because these are academies. And if there's anything that DFE can help with, I'm sure that they'll also be able to chip in. So, Chair, it's whether you want that presentation to be to go through again, or are you happy that members understand the information already? Well,
thanks, Rob. Yeah, I understand. I mean, as members of certain scrutiny panels, I've seen you. Yeah, but this is a redevised. So, if you don't mind, I'd like you to present that to the board.
Is it to be shared? Should I just?
Yes, I think so. Before Rob started, I know obviously there's a lot of people on my screen. So, if you have any questions, we'll wait till Rob finishes, and then we'll open it up to the board if there's any question for Rob before we proceed with the rest of the presentation. Cheers, Rob.
I'll just wait to open up on my screen. Is it coming up?
Nothing yet, Rob.
No.
Okay. Well, I've got it. I don't know. I think everybody else has. Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
That should be full screen now, is it? No. No?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So in discussing permanent exclusions, you'll see that there's a pattern that typically evolves, which is around our year 10s, 11s. That's been the case within this year as well, but we've also got permanent exclusions occurring in younger age groups within secondary. However, as you can see from the year 5 and year 6 data field, it isn't within our primary schools. So this is an issue that's completely within our secondary schools in Middlesbrough, although elsewhere in the region they have seen primary school exclusions. It is particular just to our secondary schools. We have got exclusions taking place around years 7 and particularly 8 and 9, and schools are on hand, so I won't kind of go into the reasons for that straight away, but that is more unusual in our data set. Also draw attention on there to the fact that there's been exclusions withdrawn, and that's to do with challenge from the parent who would object to the exclusion, or governance within the school, so governors deciding that wasn't an exclusion that should be upheld, or for a few other reasons that, again, schools will go into. So I'll move on from this slide. This slide presents the permanent exclusions against each school. So you can see some schools have higher exclusion rates than others. We have UCA, which is Unity City Academy, and their principal within the meeting today, who will talk about some of the best practice that's been applied within UCA to keep them permanent exclusions low. We'll also hear from our team, Matt, who manages those exclusions, and I think Leanne's far better placed than I to describe her role within the process, so I'll leave it to Leanne. As a request from members, there was a discussion about any Middlesbrough residents who are at schools out of area. So we've included this slide, which is just the other schools where we've got exclusions from Middlesbrough residents. There isn't a great deal of statistical relevance within this area because our residents attending a school in this list is not the predominant group within the school. There'll be a minority. So therefore, there may be far higher or just a few more exclusions from a Redcar child or from a Stockton child, etc. So we can't really make the comparisons. I think the relevance of this slide is just to say there's only a few coming from schools outside of Middlesbrough. We've got some trend analysis here, and this was discussed with our scrutiny panel recently. And this just describes the pattern of exclusions over the last few years. What you can see is that in 21-22, as in this year, we're only at Easter, so kind of 2/3 into the year, we're already exceeding the rate that we were at the end of the year within 2020 and 19 and 18 too. So on this trajectory, and it depends on very much what happens next, which is why OSB is so interested in this, and quite rightly so. But it's very much around whether that demand can now be slowed down and we keep it at around 54, or whether it continues with the trajectory that'll take us around the 70-80 mark, which would far exceed the rates of previous years. We've done this just to demonstrate really that there isn't a lot in this in terms of boys and girls. I think historically you would have seen it being where in a gender split, there would have been more boys excluded, and it certainly would have been around that year 10-11. It's a bit more of an even match, so it's shown exclusions are occurring with both boys and girls and at all age groups. The key reason for these exclusions occurring is recorded within a formal set of descriptors so when you exclude a young person, then you will tag it against one of these descriptors. So the one that's used the most is persistent disruptive behavior, which it's the way it goes at a national level, but it doesn't really get into that kind of granular level of the specific reason. And although we do work with schools to understand the specific reasons, in presentation of this, it just shows us persistent disruptive behavior. That is typically something that's been ongoing for a fair period of time. If it's a one-off, it often is a physical assault on an adult, physical assault on a pupil. So them kind of explosive incidents that have come quickly. Persistent disruptive behavior is more likely to be characterized as something that's been ongoing for quite some time. We've compared this against a neighbouring authority, and whilst this isn't, and you've seen the statistical comparators in a previous meeting of OSB, so I haven't repeated that, but I've just shown another neighbouring authority which has shown a similar trend of an increase in exclusions over this year. So this is to provide that kind of more broader perspective from the region. On the fixed term exclusions, we can see again that there's a particular trend of an increase or a lot of fixed term exclusions occurring. It is probably worthwhile flagging that an increase in or a high level of fixed term exclusions doesn't directly correlate to a high level of permanent exclusions at the same level, but it probably does have a link in the sense that the more fixed term exclusions, then we have also seen an increase in permanent exclusions, but it's at 1,400 or more for one of those schools there. They haven't all directly translated into permanent exclusions, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Again, by far and away, the greatest driver fixed term exclusions is persistent disruptive behaviour, which is the same as permanent exclusions. So again, you can draw that link, but just not directly. It's not a case of every single fixed term exclusion leads to a permanent, as you would expect. Within the local authority to respond to this, and you've heard about this already, but just to recap, we've appointed more officer time into, or more officer resource into looking at the case audit of the paperwork behind the exclusion. There's been an immediate temporary member of staff appointed. There's further recruitment going on there, and that's about ensuring that the exclusion process is adhered to by our schools, and that there's appropriate challenge offered or information offered to parents to make appropriate challenge and to governors. We've assigned additional staffing to provide more parental guidance, which I've just mentioned. We're increasing the oversight process via robust reporting tools. There's regular meetings with the head teachers to discuss this issue, and as you see today, we've got members of the school community at the meeting. We've raised these issues with DfE, who are also in attendance today, and continuing to raise awareness of our inclusion model, which seeks to go upstream. It's an early help approach within our schools to wrap around support with pupils who are involved in that persistent disruptive behaviour, or maybe it's presented as something slightly different, a kind of a unmet mental health need, etc. But to try and provide that support at the earliest opportunity to stop the behaviour from becoming to the point where it is that breach of the behaviour policy and leads to an exclusion. We're also planning to do a SEN and inclusion peer review over the next few months. I'm just trying to clear that off now. Is that cleared off?
Yeah, that's fine, Rob. Yeah.
It was really, Chair, if there was any points of clarity required or any further questions from members.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll open it up to the members now before we go any further. I can see. Is it you, Chris? Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing that I'd just like to mention is that it is really worrying that from year 7, when we had 8 exclusions, it actually doubled by year 10. Now, I know what you're saying, Rob, is that they're managing the behaviour, but actually, this is something that we really need to be thinking about. And I'm sure we're going to have some answers from some of the head teachers this morning, and I know that a lot of them have got good practice there. I do know one school that's got a counsellor in helping the pupils out. So I know there are things going on there, but I'd just like to think that we are going to get some answers as to why this happens. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to pick up on that, Rob?
I certainly agree. We've got a significant amount of permanent exclusions, and quite rightly OSB should be looking to provide challenge and support, which is exactly how you've just phrased that, Councillor. It's around looking at the right for all of our children to receive the very best education possible, and to hold our schools and other education providers to account, but also to ensure that the support's available should the school community flag particular issues around access to, as you've just said there, but counsel and services, etc.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Arawi.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the challenge for school exclusions. So based on personal experience, I'll just say this anecdotally. As a councillor, I represented a resident in the ward whom I encouraged to challenge the exclusion of that child who was actually in a primary school. I took legal advice about how to raise the challenge, and I got help and advice from the council support teams. And in the end, the exclusion was overturned. Now, that whole process for a parent was extremely, extremely difficult, worrying, stressful. So my point is that although sometimes challenges can be raised, and sometimes, that the exclusion is overturned, that whole process is one of the most stressful processes the parent could have to go through. And preparing a case to challenge the exclusion given by the school It took me absolutely hours. It would take anybody hours. I went through details of reports and everything from the school. So I'm saying really that given that we have got some challenges and some exclusions that have been overturned, I wonder to what extent others may have been overturned or been possibly overturned if the parents had had a structured support behind them. Because I would say for many of our parents, it's just too difficult and stressful to go through meeting the challenge to have an exclusion overturned. So my issue is around the process that we put into place to have exclusions, to go to appeal, basically.
Thank you, councillor. Can you answer that, Rob, or?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's very valid, councillor, that you would mention the challenge process. It's something that the local authority is aware of as well, which is why we've put more resource into that area so we can dedicate more time to each parent or family member when they've went through this process. And obviously, as numbers have grown, then there is more demand coming, so the officers appointed have got more of a workload. So that's why we've expanded that area of the team. Trevor, do you want to talk to the process, please, around the
yes,
challenge process?
Yeah, of course. So the point is a valid one. It can be a really difficult process, and it can be quite intimidating for parents, depending on the circumstance and depending on a number of factors. So we acknowledge that, we understand that, and often parents find it difficult to actually articulate how strongly they feel, or perhaps the context in which the family is operating. So they often feel as if they need someone to explain the process to them so that they understand what their options are. And someone on occasion to advocate for them on their behalf if they feel that they're not able to advocate in their own right. So to address that, we've increased the number of officer hours that we set against that particular piece of work. So we've now got effectively a full-time officer whose role is to work with parents in that very situation. So the process simply is that when a school informs us that they are going to permanently exclude a child, there are a number of processes that would administrative things that we need to do. So we've got case officers who do that, and at that point, the contact details for the family will be passed on to one of our advisors, who will then make contact with the family and either have a telephone conversation or do a home visit or arrange contact at whatever the parents want, really, and spend some time with the family to understand what the situation is and to go through the various courses of action, because sometimes it is about wanting to challenge the exclusion. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's the parents just want to know what happens next and what should I or what can I do. So the officer will spend a lot of time going through the options and making sure that the parent, we're trying to get to a point where all parents in this situation would feel empowered to make the right decision for the young person, for their child. That's where we're trying to get. And I think we may not be there, we may not be quite there yet, but we're not far from that point. Certainly every parent of an excluded child, from this point going forward, they will be contacted by an officer within really probably the same day or certainly the next day following the exclusion.
Thank you. Chair, could I just come back with another point that people might not be aware of?
Go ahead.
Having been through this whole process with the resident, I accept everything you've said, Trevor, and we did get a great deal of help from the local authority even before we got this new person's role in place. So I was very grateful for the help that we got from the authority. But when you go to this appeal process, it's like going to a tribunal. It's like going into a courtroom. And you have to be, I would say, quite eloquent as a parent to be able to argue the case, even though you have got support. And honestly, I think that parent I was with found it the most challenging thing she ever did. She cried for ages when we came out. I'm just trying to say, from some points of view, it's not only the process of the preparation, but also the courtroom that you have to go through. I can only describe it as a courtroom. You know, it's all a very strategic process. Somebody can talk, you can't say this, you can't say that. It was, I don't know if there's any way of simplifying the process to make it accessible, more easily accessible to many of our parents, because the structure that's there within that courtroom context is extremely challenging and stressful. So it's just for people to understand how complicated the challenge. I wouldn't have guessed it was so difficult if I hadn't actually been through it with a resident person. I would never have thought it was so awful a process.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. I'll bring Sue Butcher in. So you've got your hand up. You're on mute, Sue.
Sorry, Chair, I was struggling to unmute then. Just a very small and quick point of clarity, if I may, Chair. The presentation said that we were bringing in some temporary capacity in terms of the challenge with schools. There are 2 bits of capacity there, just to say that actually that person has started. He's an experienced consultant who works with schools and has worked with schools and been an assistant director elsewhere. So just as a point of clarity there, that has already started.
Thank you for that, Sue. Thank you. Councillor Janet Walker, have you got your hand up, Janet?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'm back. Right. I'm just wondering, just a couple of questions actually regarding this. Do any of the persistent disruptive behaviour pupils, are they awaiting, is there a correlation between them awaiting any mental health issues, maybe diagnosis for ADHD, any other or anything else that could be actually causing their persistent disruptive behaviour? And secondly, another part is that, you know, what actually happens to the excluded pupils? If they're excluded, what are we doing to actually encourage the education of those people whilst they're not at school? I do believe there is something in place, but I'd like to be reminded if possible. And I think that's basically, I want to see whether there's a correlation between one thing and another. And of course, we know that our mental health and actually diagnosis and the mental health service is very slow to react to with pupils and young people. So I'm just wondering whether there's a correlation between one thing and another. Is that a possibility to find out that? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Rob, are you best to answer that, or is Caroline? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Chair. So where we're quite naturally getting to is that discussion around what is happening in the school, rather than the process at the point of exclusion. Now, in the school, and schools will be better to talk about this than me, but we've got an inclusion strategy which is led by Caroline and her team, and that is looking at that involvement at an earlier stage to manage behaviour. So it's exactly as you've just said, Councillor, that some of these presentations of persistent disruptive behaviour are actually some greater underlying need that needs to be met. So that's support for the individual, support for the family, and that's wrapped around with an inclusion officer from the local authority. In some of our pilot schools, we're looking at police involvement as well. It's looking at the school itself and the myriad of different offers within the school, because as Andy will explain soon, I'm sure, there's all sorts of support within the school. It's not solely the classroom teacher, there's their pastoral support, etc. as well. So it's all about trying to manage that behaviour at the earlier stage. And I think Andy will probably explain, without me putting words in his mouth, around how that can be very successful in some schools. So there's definitely some learning we can take away from schools such as UCA. As I've said that, I've just noticed you stood up to leave though. The process beyond the exclusion, Leanne at RT Mat, so Leanne Chilton will be best to explain that. But in essence, there's a legal responsibility for the local authority once that once that exclusion is made to meet the needs of the young person and find them appropriate education provision. So that takes the form of AP and things like that. So I think, Chair, we kind of get to that point naturally, where it starts to become more about what the schools can offer and how the local authority is providing services that the schools take up. So your Head Start offer, which is around mental health, or your inclusion model, which I've described in brief.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Thank you. Before we go on, is that okay, Councillor Walker? Yeah,
thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Before we go any further, ask Andy from UCA to join. I'd just like to bring in maybe Kim or Paul from the school commissioner to see if they would like anything to add before we go any further. Now, forgive me, I can't see you. I can't, or your name's not up, so I'd just like you. Yeah. Is that you, Kim? Were you waving? Yeah.
Yeah, it's me, Chair. Yeah, sorry, my name did come up, but it's there now.
Now it is. Now it is. Yeah. Now you speak and your name's coming up. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you for attending anyway. So, would you like to add anything what's already been said, Kim?
No, not really. I think from our perspective, that there's no right number of suspensions or permanent exclusions, and we just, we back head teachers to maintain calm, safe, supportive environments for the benefits of all pupils and staff in their schools, and that includes obviously supporting them to use their powers. But we are very clear in that, those powers should only be used as an absolute last resort. But I'm sure that's something that you'll hear from sort of Andy and from the heads as well.
Right, yeah. I've just got one question from you, Kim. I don't know whether it's just, I know obviously you're responsible for the North East, and I know we've got some figures here from our neighbouring authorities. But have you still got these? Do you have these problems around the North East? That the figures that Middlesbrough has to cope with at the moment.
I mean, the figures that we have, there are figures actually published on gov.uk. When you compare Middlesbrough, I think this is 1920, because the figures are quite lagged as well, Chair, from our point of view, whereas the local authority has more up-to-date figures. Okay. So when you have a look at Middlesbrough compared to the northeastern England, it does seem higher. It's relatively higher, but of course there are lots of contextual issues, and these are the things that we do say to schools that we must take into account, sort of any extenuating circumstances or contributing factors that are identified after a behaviour incident's occurred. So it's very difficult to compare region to region, but I think if you look at the England numbers that are published on gov.uk, Middlesbrough does appear to be relatively high.
Thanks, Kim. I'm not sure whether I can open up if any of the members have got questions for Kim while she's talking. Can't see no hands there, Kim. So okay, we're going to go further on now. Then I'd like to welcome Andy Rogers from the UCA. Andy, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your attending this morning's meeting. So can I pass it over to you to maybe explain to the board how you handle exclusions and what the situation is at the UCA?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, thank you for inviting me today to come and speak and maybe put a little bit of context. And I think Rob's right that some of the questions from councillors, I've jotted them down as we were going, because I think I might have maybe some of the answers for you from more of an up-to-date school context rather than from the council perspective. But yeah, Unity, obviously, I know I'm teaching people who are from the area about the area, but Unity is the most challenging school in Middlesbrough on paper by a significant distance. We have the highest pupil premium, the highest free school meals. We also have the majority of Czech and Romanian Roma students, although they don't live in our ward. We bus them into our ward because historically we were the school that had spaces. In terms of Unity, though, actually, we are pretty much full now. So we're not a school that has surplus spaces anymore. We're a school of choice within Middlesbrough. I think I had 170 first choices coming in September. We're oversubscribed with the new intake. So it is a school that's improved rapidly over the last sort of 7 years that I've worked here. But it is down to us having, I guess, more of a slow burning approach to improving the quality of the provision, starting with the pastoral need of our students, because the needs within our community, both for the parents and the students, are really complex. So to put the sort of a figure on it, I guess, I have a full-time counsellor who's qualified to do both students and adults. That is a massive investment that we have. I also, on top of that, have 4 qualified mental health first aiders whose full-time job is to work with students that have social, emotional, mental health. You'll hear SEMH get branded around quite a bit in terms of a SEN need. It stands for social and emotional needs. I have 4 members of staff that work with those students all day, every day, in order to do interventions with them, in order to go into their lessons and make sure that they're settled. I have 2 safeguarding members of staff because of the high caseload that we have of vulnerable students who are in not just lack, but who have social worker attachment and who are on the cusp of that in terms of early help. And in addition to that, my pastoral team for a school that is now growing, but I think I've got 5 members of non-teaching staff that work full-time with the rest of the year team, with the rest of the year group, just to maintain that calm environment, to work with students, to intervene before issues happen within the school day. And it's things like that and that investment. I must have just quoted about £200,000 worth of staffing that doesn't necessarily exist in other schools, that we invest in through our budget in order to try and maintain a high quality of education, but get the students to be engaged in school. We also have sort of weekly vulnerable meetings to try and preempt problems before they happen. I'm sure you'll be aware from the press, we have obviously a food bank that runs, we call it an eco shop, that runs every Friday. But we also went into partnership with Middlesbrough College to deliver adult learning within that same building, which has started up again now COVID's finished. I've also had some of my staff trained in delivering parenting classes because of the nature, a lot of the issues that we have with our students. To be honest, it's not necessarily that they have special educational needs that are undiagnosed. It's that their parents are not performing at an adequate level in order to parent them properly, to get them to conform when they attend school. And the lack of support from parents, I can speak for myself, but I'm sure it'll be the same within other schools within the borough. It is poor parenting that is the major contributing factor to persistent poor behaviour being the ultimate result within any permanent exclusion or fixed term exclusions that take place. And I can speak for myself this year, because our fixed term exclusions, although relatively low compared to the rest of the town, are still higher than I would want them to be. And they're still higher than pre-pandemic. But it has absolutely been this year a case of children who have been allowed to do whatever they want when they've been at home for the past 2 years, haven't heard the words no, or if they have been allowed to just do what they want if they kicked and screamed loud enough. And we can't tolerate that within school. And albeit I think we have handled it very well, some schools clearly have struggled in order to address that issue that they have. And I think it's when it comes to be a designation for a fixed term exclusion, it's the refusal. You can't get a 14-year-old girl to do something that she does not want to do, or a 14-year-old boy or 15-year-old boy to do something that they don't want to do. And the number of children who have been given a very basic request, very simple thing that we would think nothing of, if they don't want to do that, the pace in which they will escalate that situation to be violent, verbally abusive towards students and other members of staff wandering around the school building, causing a massive disruption, is unbelievably quick. And therefore that student cannot stay on site because it's unsafe. And I think that is why we're getting the level of fixed term exclusions that we're seeing. They're not necessarily transporting into permanent exclusions, as Rob said, because once they have been fixed term excluded, it's an obligation that the parent has to attend the school the next day for that meeting to try and come to terms with what the issues are, what support can then be put in place so that we can prevent it from happening again. And obviously DFE track and Ofsted look at very clearly students who've been excluded one time within a year, but then how many students have been excluded more than once within a year? And I think there are some very interesting figures that perhaps this board would be interested in to look at. I don't know if the local authority get them as quickly as obviously we do, but not having repeat offenders. If a student's been excluded once within the year, but then never again, well, then it was a very valid and useful intervention that's taken place, and then some support's gone in place. And if they haven't needed to be excluded again, then that was a good use of our powers in that case. If students are being excluded multiple times across a year, it's then a case of what interventions are going in place to make sure that we try and support them out of that sort of cycle that they're into. But to defend, so obviously we've currently excluded 4 students this year, all for persistent bad behaviour. they were all in year 9 or year 10. And I think one of the councillors asked about why it gets to the point that they're in sort of year 10 when they get permanently excluded for persistent bad behaviour. If you're doing your job properly, and I hope that we feel that we are, and other schools are, it's because you've tried for 3 years to give them the support that's needed. But ultimately, there comes a time when you have got nothing more to give. There is nothing left for you to do within anyone's sort of scope to support the child any further. And there comes a point when, unfortunately, that child will have to be permanently excluded. And it gets around that year 9, year 10 point when that is the case. All the SEND screening will have been completed. They'll have been to counselling. They'll have tried another school as a fresh start. All of the different interventions. We have extensive numbers of children, and we invest massively in alternative provisions within the Middlesbrough area that we have to buy into in order to give them short-term placements or longer-term placements to try and rectify the behaviour and then bring them back. So it's not until all of those things have taken place, early help referrals, etc., if there's any social care needs. So we go around the world to try and support the child and the family. But the reason that the permanent exclusions come later in their school life is because after we've done everything we can, there has to be a line in the sand that we can't do anymore because of the disruption to other children within the school. And it is a balancing act that we have to face. None of you would want your grandchildren or children to be constantly disrupted by another child within a classroom. And as bad as this is, that is the reality for the 30 other children or the 29 other children in that classroom, that their learning is being ruined by maybe one individual who, more often than not, within this case, is just naughty because of the way that their parents are bringing them up and allowing them to do what they want within the community. And we know that the figures for policing within the community mirror that within the sort of the wards that we're talking about. So I know I've rambled on a little bit there, but I'm more than happy to take as many questions as you would like. If you want to know how things work within secondary schools and within the exclusions process, I'm more than happy to answer as many questions as I can.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. It's really honest and detailed presentation you've just given me about what's happening in your school and how you are what you're doing to help the students. I'm going to open it up, if that's okay, with the members if they've got any questions or comments to you. Yeah, I've got a couple of hands up. Councillor Hobson, you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation, and Andy. That was really good, and it does explain quite a lot of things to us. And I know of the investment that you're putting in. Do you get any extra? I mean, I know you are. It's a very challenging school, very challenging area where you are, and I just wondered if the government helped in any way because of the nature of the deprivation, etc., where of the school where you are, and can you put more investment in the other schools in a better area, if you like? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. In terms of investment, because we have such a high levels of deprivation within the school, we do receive pupil premium funding at quite a high level, but that is just a reflection of the number of pupil premium students that we have. And then it's for me to justify the spend on those students in order to say that they're getting the best deal that they possibly can in order to level them up towards a non-pupil premium child, for instance. But other schools get the same amount per child as I do. I've got more of them, which is why that on paper I would get slightly more funding in that area. In terms of other funding, no, we don't get anything based on deprivation other than the pupil premium grant. I will say, just because Kim's on the call, that Unity was part of the One Vision programme, which is ending this year. I don't know if councillors are aware of that, but it wasn't specifically to do with exclusions or behaviour. It was just to support the school in a more rapid improvement journey. And we did receive funding for that over the past 3 years, which was quite substantial from central government and from the DFE, which has been very successful in the metrics that we were looking at. So I will say that we had funding, but it wasn't necessarily as part of something just for behaviour and pastoral. It was to improve the school in general within the North East block.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Yeah,
Please?
Okay, Councillor Hobson. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Andy, you've had that funding for 3 years. It's now obviously I think my question is, do you think that you've got the school now to the place where you were hoping to get it with that money, and when the money stops, will that make a big difference to, I mean, obviously it's going to make a difference in funding, yes, but will it make a difference to what's going on in the school now, after you've had this money for 3 years? Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the One Vision programme, the bidding process was very specific that it had to be a sustainable investment. So any investment that was made, we had to be able to factor it in after their funding stopped. We needed to be at short affordability moving forwards. So nothing that's happened over the past 3 years will cease to exist anymore. It was very much well, having worked in different sort of funding bids previously in different lives, that it is the most sort of thought out bidding process that I've worked under, and it is very much sustainability was the key. And yeah, the school, on every metric that we look at and you guys look at, our attendance is one of the best in Middlesbrough, our exclusions are one of the lowest in Middlesbrough, our progress 8 score is holding its own. When exam results come back, hopefully we'll be there or thereabouts again as well. So very much so. And if I ever get inspected again, which I've been waiting for a while, I'm quite certain that we'll be a good school. So that'll be the last little piece of that jigsaw to verify everything.
Okay,
thank you very much for that. Thank you for that answer. I know that Unity is, over the many years that it's been there, has been up and down a lot. So that does answer my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker, Jeanette.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Andy. That was absolutely brilliant to listen to, and you're absolutely determined, aren't you, really? And that is so refreshing as well. I'm not saying that other head teachers aren't in the same position, but you've obviously taken the bull by the horn, because Unity City Academy did have some really big challenges, and I think you faced those head on. And I think with that extra money, you've actually helped to sustain those improvements, and to see the actual things that you're putting in place is really refreshing. All these things that you were talking about, you know, the safeguarding staff, the rapidly improving quality of provision, all those things you've hit them all on the head. And I think I would like to know, and I will ask a question then on this. You say that you're having adult learning and obviously parenting classes, which you find very, very important. And I think many of us here today will actually agree with you there. I think a lot of parents, with parents very young and maybe didn't have the influence for their own parents, and now that's unfortunately coming through now to their children. So I'm wondering, what's the actual take up on the parenting classes, and also the adult learning? I think that's very important as well. So is there a large take up on that, considering, as I know, we've had COVID and everything the last 2 years? Obviously that will most really show better now over the next year, but I'm just wondering how things are working out on that. And I think you're doing a grand job.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the parenting classes, we linked it very much to early help referrals, because obviously school can refer into early help. And then we offered the parenting classes. We were very conscious. It's run in the old caretaker's house, which has a separate entrance. So we tried to keep it as subtle as possible for the parents, because the stigma of attending it, and it's the same building for the adult learning as well. And to try and get as many people to be engaging it, it's not as if they're walking in the school's front door. They're coming in a sort of a back entrance and into a separate building. So we've tried to make them feel as comfortable as possible. The parenting classes, obviously, this is all pre-COVID, did have good turnout ultimately. Once we got the first little group through, and it was sort of quite positive, then more parents did take it up after that. And they're starting up again now COVID's over. And similarly, the adult learning with Middlesbrough College was successful pre-COVID, but obviously had to stop for that past 2 years. But Middlesbrough College are coming to put the lessons back on again, and I'm comfortable that we'll have a good take up as well, because it is vital that our parents sort of do not get better, but do get the skills in order to parent their children better, because that is the biggest barrier that I see. Certainly within this community, that is the problem that we have. And as much as it pains me to see it and say it, the number of verbal assaults from a child onto their parent in front of us is awful. It's a weekly occurrence, and these are not mild-mannered little young children having a little paddy, they're full-blown verbal assaults
Yeah.
for us asking them to do something basic and the parent agreeing with us. It is a constant occurrence and is something that we need to try and work with the parents to try and get her back on board, I guess.
Thank you very much for that, and Andy, thank you.
Councillor Lau, thanks, Jeanette. Councillor Lowy, I've lost you on video, but I can still see your hand up. Are you there, Alma? Can you hear me, Alma? I think we've lost your sound, Alma. I can see your hand up, but you're not responding, so I'm not sure whether you can do anything about that, Caroline. I'm not sure. Councillor Davison, I can see your hand up.
Yes, I would really just like to make a comment, Chair, with regards to the adult learning. And I think this goes to Rob really and his team there, that I'm pleased to hear that they're actually taking the adult learning to the school. I'm not expecting parents to get down to either Middlesbrough College or somewhere in the town. And I'm so pleased that they're taking it to the school because it's so important.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you. Alma.
Okay, thank
Can
you,
you hear
Chair.
me?
Can you hear?
You're freezing up, actually, Alma, but I'm sorry, Alma. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yes, can
You're
you hear
freezing
me,
up.
Chair? Yes,
Now I can, Alma.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead. Alma, I'm sorry, Alma. You've come off now, and I can't even hear you. So I think we're gonna have to move on. I'm not getting nothing off you, Alma. I'm sorry about that. Andy, I think Councillor Brian Hubbard, yeah, Councillor Hubbard, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just to say, Andy's, I think he's the new head of the school. He's really turning the school around. We do speak to a lot of pupils because it borders in our ward. And the best feedback is to get it off the pupils themselves, and they're really enjoying attending the school. You can even see at the end of the day, Ormsby Road used to be covered with litter when the kids come out. You actually see now there's hardly any litter. And I think there's that sense of pride being put back in the school. And I think it's thanks to Andy and his teachers. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor. I totally agree with that, Councillor Hubbard. You're right. It is, yeah. Okay. Well, as I say, I can only see Alma's hand up, Councillor Lowry's hand up, but I haven't got no voice or no video on, Caroline, so I'm not sure what's happening there. So unfortunately, we're going to have to move on. Andy, as I say, as the member said, really impressed by what you've been saying. I'm so pleased that you're working your socks off to make that school a better place for students and everybody else. You're quite willing to stay for the rest of the topic if you want, but I realise you'll be a busy gent. So, as I say, thanks very much for attending.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, Andy, thank you. Before we move on to Leanne from River Tees, I'd like to bring Caroline in because I believe we have a statement from the Hugh Hegarty. He was the CEO of the Nicholas Postgate Trust, in which the Trinity College belongs to. I believe he's left a statement, Caroline. Could you let the board know what's said, please?
Yes, obviously, we did receive responses from different head teachers or chief executive officers advising that they couldn't make it today. However, Hugh Hegarty sent this message that he would like sharing with the board today. So it states, thank you for your email highlighting the significant priority the local authority places on the level of exclusion at schools within the Middlesbrough local authority. Please share this at the meeting so our position can be understood. Please be assured that Nicholas Postgate Catholic Academy Trust share your concerns and fully understand that this issue, like many, is one that requires a broad understanding of the complex triggers at an individual and equally significant causes at a societal level that adversely impact on the lives of so many young people. You will, of course, be aware of the work undertaken by Nicholas Postgate Catholic Academy Trust in respect of delivering the high level of support for our pupils, as having been engaged with the DfE and in particular Mr Tom Bennett over a sustained period, we have adopted policies and procedures that are very much in line with best practice. The Trust continue to engage with DfE in respect of our engagement with the Behaviour Hub programme aimed at school-to-school support reference to providing appropriate guidance, support and training. An area which your councillors may wish to consider is whether they are of the view that on occasion exclusion is a necessary step, and if so, what is then in place post-exclusion to address the needs of the child. I really feel that a light is shone on an extract from Behaviour in Schools document published in January 2022. Paragraph 89 states, all pupils are entitled to an education where they are protected from disruption and can learn in a calm, orderly, safe and supportive environment. Head teachers can use suspension and permanent exclusion in response to serious incidents or in response to persistent poor behaviour, which has not improved following in-school sanctions and interventions. Our record of quality interventions and additional support pathways involving multi-agency support has been acknowledged by Ofsted in multiple inspections, so many of which have been in our Middlesbrough schools. I am aware of this work being recognised by many representatives from the local authority, who by getting in touch with myself offered support and generous feedback on the sterling work undertaken across our schools in Middlesbrough, inclusive of high impact, tailored, early and ongoing interventions. North Postgate Catholic Academy Trust must ensure the safety of all children and staff in its care and will continue to do so, and as the previously referenced policies and protocols are drawn when any behaviour is a source of concern. We are spending in excess of £500,000 this academic year on alternative provision to further support pupils in crisis who are finding life in school a challenge beyond our capacity to support. This figure, in tandem with the vast and sustained range of interventions in support of our pupils, demonstrates our commitment we have to an inclusive offer for every child. We set the highest standards of behaviour and anticipate that pupils and parents support this, as agreed when applying for admission into one of our schools. We will not and do not accept abusive behaviour, bullying or violence in any of our schools. It is imperative that we have a community where children and staff's mental health is accounted for in the day-to-day life of the school. Any scenario where a sense of fear or anxiety may manifest as a consequence of inappropriate behaviour will be met with sanctions as per our policies and protocol. Once again, please accept my apology and be assured that our commitment to our students is relentless, and I wish you and all the council as well as you discharge your statutory duties in the very best interests of the entire community. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to say that to speak for the rest, all of the board, and could you send our appreciation for that statement? I know obviously he's not here to ask questions, but you know, as I say, I really do appreciate that statement. Thanks, Caroline.
Will do. Thanks, Chair.
We're going to move on now to we have Leanne Chilton, and I believe she's the head of the River Tees School. Leanne, welcome once again. Thank you for attending this morning's meeting. So I'll just pass it over to you to explain what your role is and what the River Tees does to help the students who's been excluded. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning. I'm Regional Head Teacher over at River Tees Multi-Academy Trust. So we're an alternative provision academy. So when the young person has been permanently excluded from school or at risk of permanent exclusion, then we will be one of the providers that Middlesbrough use for education for those young people. So we're commissioned by the local authority to provide education to 96 young people. The split of that is approximately, we do try and be as flexible as we can, but 40 young people in Key Stage 4, so 14 to 16-year-olds, 40 in Key Stage 3, so that 11 to 13-year-olds, and 16 in primary. We work, as I've said, very closely with the local authority. So when the young person's been excluded, the inclusion team send over their referral to have a look at, to see if we think we can address their needs. They come in then for a period of assessment. So in that initial assessment, we look at as quickly as we can their academic needs, as well as then what we think their well-being needs are, their therapeutic needs, etc. So we're aware really that, you know, for whatever reason is driving that behaviour, that child has then missed often a significant period of education. So for us, it's really important that we can try and identify what those barriers are quickly to try and get that child regulated again and learning again. So after 6 weeks of them being with us, we hold what we call a formulation meeting. So it's an internal meeting, but we bring all of that information together. You know, what are we seeing? How are we seeing the child present? Are they attending? What's their behaviour like? What's their academic learning like? How are they functioning emotionally? Have we got any concerns around mental health? And within that, we then put a plan together. We call it a personal development plan, and we set a number of targets really for the child to then work on. You know, what I would say, you know, and it's been commented on already, is that we're not funded in the same way as a school. So the cost of a place in our academy is much higher than a school place. So it does give us the ability to do you know, a lot of the work that you've been talking about this morning in terms of kind of prevention, if you like, and supporting that child's personal development. But I'll just talk a little bit about that. So while the child's with us, what we look at really is what is their pathway out. At one point, many moons ago, the government talked about calling us short stay schools. It didn't last very long. We were all going to be renamed as that. But the idea is that actually a child comes in and we look at what their pathway out is. So while they're with us, we may work, if they're still on roll with a school, whether we think that child needs an education healthcare assessment, we'd work with the school to do that, or we may do that ourselves if the child's been permanently excluded. We may look at, does the child need another opportunity to attend a different mainstream school? Do they need a chance to have a managed move, change of placement, look at something a little bit different? Or do they need to stay with us a little bit longer while we try and work through the behaviours? Because what's difficult, if you looked at my behaviour information and my behaviour data for those young people, the children that come into us generally behave extremely well. What we've got to then decide as a school is that because the type of education, we only have groups of 8 to 10 children in a class, we have 2 staff with those class. In Key Stage 3, we run like a primary model, so they have most of the time the same teacher. Is it because what we're doing is working right, and that's what they need longer term? Or is it because actually we're working through the barriers that's caused that behaviour, you know, whatever it is they're trying to communicate in their previous mainstream school, and therefore need an opportunity to move on to a new mainstream and be given another chance? So that's primarily the work that we do while they're here. In terms of academic, we're very big on aspirations, we're very big on outcomes. All of our learners do a suite of GCSEs, you know, leave between 5 and 9 GCSEs while they're with us. So we have very high expectations in terms of that academic curriculum. And we recognise that sometimes that can be the barrier. If they can't read, they can't access that curriculum in school. Therefore, they're already going to go into crisis to avoid that lesson or to avoid being asked to do that academic aspect. So a lot of the work we do is around the academic and making sure we close those gaps very quickly. But then another big piece of work is obviously around their personal development. Our curriculum is underpinned by 3 things: currency, as I've already talked about, the academic, but character and community. So we do a lot of work around who are they and who do they want to be? What are we doing in terms of preparation for adulthood? We very much say to the young people, and when they come through the door to us, is you've got to get yourself back on track, and you've got to be able to be alongside and in line with your peers at post 16 to move on to your next stage of education and employment. And a lot of that work is done with the young people all the time in terms of what does your next step look like? How do we resolve what's going on here and get you ready? And a lot of work around the community. You know, where is their place in the wider world? Yes, around careers, but also what's happening in their locality. You know, we're literally round the corner from Andy. We can see him out of our window. So we are based near Andy, but obviously we pick up the young people from right across the Middlesbrough locality. So we do work as well in terms of looking at what's happening in those wards. Are there community issues that we need to pick up with the young people? And we work with a number of stakeholders, as Andy said, in terms of doing that. Andy mentioned a little bit about staffing. You know, we have a wellbeing lead in our school who was a CAMS nurse. The work she does is absolutely invaluable, because actually if we think there is a concern around mental health, she will come in, she will observe, she will advise us as staff, but she'll also then write those reports and liaise with external stakeholders should we need to make referrals to CAMS or other kind of medical professionals, and also she'll support in that EHCP process. We also have a number of staff in our school that are trained using Thrive. Thrive is like a therapeutic intervention. So the idea of that is we unpick where in the child's early childhood have they got kind of gaps, if you like. So it's quite play-based, really. So sometimes we're taking 14-year-olds back to doing some work in the sandpit, but actually having those conversations about behaviour and emotions. And it's about making those links in their brain again to make sure those connections are all working. So we have a lot of staff that are trained in Thrive. In terms of our safeguarding and attendance team, we have 4 full-time staff that sit on that team. So again, you know, for 96 learners, we are well staffed in that, but it does mean that, you know, as Andy said, we can get food packages out, we provide the uniform for the young people here, we can take children to appointments, you know, we can check on that attendance every single day and do that knock every single day if that's what we need to do. We can transport them in when we need to. So, you know, we know that that's something we absolutely value, but something that would be a luxury often in a mainstream school. And then the other role we have is we have what we call personal development leads. So each key stage has a non-teaching member of staff that meets and greets the child at the door, you know, checks that they're okay today, checks that they've had breakfast, and is able to make sure that they're ready for the day, unpick any issues that the children are arriving with, and deal with those throughout the day. They're the liaison with the parents, often with other agencies, and just make sure really that we are managing any of that behaviour and making sure that we unpick that with the child. I think the key piece of work that we have to do with the children is what we are very good at in alternative provision is managing behaviour. We are experts at managing behaviour, but actually what we've got to do while the children are here is teach the children to manage their own behaviour, because it's no good if I've got a school, I think my school's amazing and you would be welcome to come and look around our school. I think, you know, you would see settled children working really hard with very few incidents of poor behaviour, but actually that means we're managing it really well. Our job is to make sure that we're teaching the children how to manage their behaviour, because at some point they're going to go out into that big wide world, whether it's at post 16 or whether it's back into mainstream. So we've got to give them the skills to be able to do that. Now, I've got to say, if you ask me for an area of development, reintegration into mainstream school would still be our area of development. I think COVID has cost us 2 years with that, and we weren't able to do that during COVID because we weren't able to have children sharing across schools or staff sharing across schools. So it's an area that we want to develop. We're developing an outreach model where actually we can do in-school support or staff coming in to our school to be able to do some of that training. We offer a number of kind of training routes around de-escalation, identifying needs, managing that behaviour, Thrive, etc., that we can you know, offer and work with schools. So that's our area for development. but something that we, feel very strongly about, that, we need to be able to support the schools with children returning to school. At the moment, we've got 4 reintegrating, which is positive and going positively. So, that's great that schools are willing to, give these young people another chance. Because sometimes we do say in a meeting, this is a bit of a wild card. We don't know whether it'll work, but please can we try? Because we do say to every child, their best possible chances are being in a mainstream school. So, where possible, that's what we'd like to happen. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Leanne. You beat me to it. I'm going to open it up to the members. Yeah, I can see Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. That sounds really good, Leanne, and thank you for that presentation. One of my question is that, they come in and they're in a small setting. So you've got 8 in a class with 2 members of staff. Now, that is absolutely excellent, but and it gives them confidence to move on. And I do know that this would happen, that, the confidence will build up because they've got 2 members of staff there, making sure that things are going right. To integrate them back into the mainstream, obviously they're going back into a large class again. And I would have thought that takes quite a long time. So do you integrate them on a just maybe a half day basis to start off with, and then gradually get them going for more time? And once you've got the confidence built up, I'm sure that is a really good thing. But when they go back into mainstream school, my worry is that they're back in with the mainstream children who could knock their confidence just like that. And I just wondered how you cope with that sort of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, so it is absolutely highly personalised. So we look at each individual really and the school that they're going to. And develop the programme from there. So schools are great, they're really flexible with that. So sometimes we just start with the children's favourite lessons. So we had one child that just went in for DT for a month because that was the subject he excelled in, built his confidence, gave him lots of praise, and then started to build on the other subject areas. Some might come in to school on a morning and then come back to us on an afternoon, so we can kind of unpick how the morning's gone, put things in place for the next day. Some children or some schools actually ask that we just give them a complete fresh start, but that we have staff available to come in and do that coaching and mentoring, with the child should they need it. But you're absolutely right. For lots of children, they're happy here. For the first time in a little while, they're getting lots of praise. They're not getting those negative phone calls home. So we have very good relationship with the parents. So we have to really sell it that actually you need to move on, that it's best placed. And that is, as I've said, I love my school, and I think we do a very good job. But from the moment that child comes through the door, we do always try and instill into them that this is a short term. Let us help remove those barriers. What are the barriers? For one child a number of years ago, what we unpicked when they came into us was that they didn't have a bed. So actually, by the time we'd sorted them out with the furniture they needed at home, and they were getting a good night's sleep, their behaviour completely settled, because actually they weren't settled at school because they were just shattered all day. So actually, when you've just got that small group, you start to unpick what is the issues, what's driving that behaviour. Is it an unmet special educational need? Is it a child protection and a safeguarding need? Is it a mental health need? But actually, if we address those needs, a lot of children want to go back because that's where their friends are that live near their house. So that is a driving force for them, is they want to be with their peers. But it is tricky.
Right, thank you for that, Leanne.
I can't see that. Councillor Davison, I can see your hand up.
Yes, I would just like to ask a question with regards to the amount of young people you're able to help. Is there a waiting list to go to your school, or are you able to cope with what comms?
Yeah, so we were only commissioned by the local authority for 96 places. Rob and Caroline will smile because I always say if you could give us more buildings, we'd take more children. So, you know, actually what stops us taking more children is the size of our buildings, really, rather than anything else. So at 96, we are full because we've used all of our classroom spaces by that point. This year, you know, as Rob said, the numbers are much higher. So normally we would have several places kind of in September, and by Easter we'd be starting to get to the point of being full, where we start then having to work with the local authority to really make sure that children are on the right pathways. Actually, what we found is we were having those conversations prior to Christmas this year, of actually kind of saying, well, if I move this child here, or I move this class here, or we've converted one of our meeting rooms this year into a classroom to allow additional spaces. So yeah, normally we fly by the seat of our pants a little bit towards the end of the year, but actually this year we've had to do that much earlier.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker, Jeanette?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Leanne. Good presentation yet again. We're getting some good information here today, and thank you very much for that. So you've only got 96 places, and as that has been explained, you say short term approximately. How long do some of these pupils stay there? How long would be approximately? And do you think that is enough? And do you think maybe some of them go back to mainstream too early, or do they come back to you? So is there a persistence to come back to you, or what happens to them if they don't go back to mainstream? I've maybe missed what you said on that. And I noticed you got, is it 16 places for primary? Are they full at the moment?
Yeah, so our 16 places for primary are full. What you find at primary is every child moves on. So they do either go back to school, or they go through EHCP assessment and move on to a school that would best meet their needs. So children in primary don't get stuck. You know, we don't move children in year 6 at primary into year 7 here. We're not an all through school with 3 separate academies. So so that we see much more movement in primary. Once, if they arrive in year 10 and year 11, in that kind of 14 to 16 bracket, generally they stay with us for the 2 years because they're in the middle of GCSE programs. So trying to move children between schools and different exam boards just actually potentially sets them back. Key stage 3 is where if we get them and we can turn them around, that's where we can move them on longer. So if you like, in that period, we've got up to 3 years. But what we do look at is the quicker we can move them out, the more successful it's likely to be. So we've got a young person coming through at the moment that the inclusion team have already identified will be a quick turnaround. So we're looking to only have her in for approximately 3 weeks and then get that reintegration started. Right. But really that 6-week formulation just starts to tell us, do they need longer, or do we think they need to turn this around quickly? So yeah, it really is dependent on age, but once they've been in kind of more than 2 years, then we would say we're a bit stuck really. They're a bit, you know, used to kind of our systems and processes. But the younger they are, the quicker we can move them out.
Right, so early intervention is very essential, really, isn't it, with children coming up, rather than wait till they're 10 or 11-year-old. Is by that time certain behavioural things are actually set in place, so a bit more difficult to change them. But thank you very much for the explanation. Thank you.
I'm going to try Councillor Halawi.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can't see you, Alma.
Oh, no, I'll keep the camera off so you can hear me. My other point was with, I'll just go back onto the point I was going to make with Andy, because it relates to the point I was going to talk about with Leanne. So with Andy, I really would commend all the strategies and systems they have in that Unity City Academy to support the parents and the community as well as the children. The question there was about, if they are so successful in keeping exclusion numbers down in such a challenged ward and such a challenged community, which actually I know spreads beyond the community with the population of the school, how come schools with less challenged populations have more exclusions in the town? I mean, are they putting in place, that would be my question, the strategies and systems that are there in Unity City Academy? My other question for Leanne was, given some of the references you made, Leanne, to issues around poverty, and that was epitomised by the example of a child, I think, who didn't have a bed that you mentioned a few years ago, how many of our children, would you say, in your school are living in situations which would be described as children living in poverty? Because we do have a large proportion of children in our town living in poverty. And I wondered if that proportion was reflected in your school population.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't give you a percentage, if you like, off the top of my head, but I would say a very high percentage.
Yes, I think that's what we would expect, Chair, isn't it? Thank you for that, Leanne. That's what is a really great concern, isn't it, to all of us, that a lot of our children are damaged in some respects by the fact that they're living in such poverty, which is really an awful situation for any of us to contemplate. Thank you for that.
Okay, Alma. I know you had a question out. Andy, do you want to come back on the question what Councillor Alawi mentioned?
I think, unfortunately, it's not for me to say how other trusts or head teachers run their schools and what they spend their money on in order to get what. Ofsted rate all of those schools are good, so they're doing a good job. I couldn't possibly comment on how they run their schools, I guess. I know that what I do reflects the needs of my community.
Yes.
And I think we're doing a good job in terms of turning it around and making us what next needs to be a high performing academic school as opposed to just a successful school in terms of behaviour and attendance. We now need to get some high flying exam results to back that up. Other schools have different contextual issues that obviously they need to manage in the most appropriate way for them.
Yeah, Chair, could I come back? Thanks, Andy. I appreciate what you're saying. I understand perfectly you can't comment on other schools. But my question was sort of on a broader front. You know, given the excellent strategies that you have in place, how can we know that other schools have such similar strategies? I don't mean for you to answer it, Andy. I think it's maybe, you know, for us to find out if we can possibly, Rob Brown, if we can know what strategies that other schools that have high exclusion rates are actually putting in place, and how do they compare to Unity City Academy? That's what I'm really asking. And thanks, Andy, for responding. And I also understand that schools may not well be deemed as good if they have permanent exclusions within the new Ofsted framework. There has been a revised approach to how schools will be categorised in terms of their evaluations through Ofsted. So Ofsted's got a very firm handle on the issue of school exclusions in the new framework.
Thank you very much, Councillor Alawi. I think we're going to talk about hopefully visiting some of our schools, Councillor Alawi, which you're very welcome to attend. But we'll talk about that later in the meeting, if that's okay. Councillor Hobson, you've got your hand up there, Chris. I'm not sure whether you forgot to put it down or you've got another question.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I forgot to put it down. Sorry about that. Okay, well, what we do, I mean, I think it's been fascinating to hear from the UCA and River Tees and Kim from the commission. I think it's been fascinating, and I think it's enlightened us to what's really happening. I know we've got other schools hopefully to visit, and you know what you said about Trinity, and obviously we'll take up the invites hopefully for these visits at the schools, and we can have a broader knowledge on it. It's concerning really about the poor parenting that keeps coming up. Andy, it is concerning. It'll be very interesting if other academies or other schools feel the same way. So after saying all that, I'd like to thank you very much for attending this morning, Andy and Leanne and Kim. And as I say, we're going to move on now to the agenda, but you're quite willing to listen if you want, or if not. Thanks very much. And if you're going to have a nice day. Thank you. Okay. So following on to that, can we, Caroline,
things flatten out. Can we organise some the meetings? I'm not sure whether we can liaise with Rob and yourself and any members who wish to attend these meetings. Could
Yeah, of course, Chair. We'll set something up. Hopefully, as I say, if we can. Oh, sorry, I think Rob wants to come in there. Sorry, I don't know, Rob. Did you want to?
Yeah, Rob,
I was just going to say, yeah. We'll obviously get back to the schools and see if we can arrange some dates and times that would work well for them, and possibly if maybe a couple of members of the board could go to each school with one of the officers, possibly that might work well, and then we can feed that back at the next meeting, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, Rob, did you want to come in and say something about that?
Just echoing what Caroline said. Yeah, we'll certainly arrange that. And there's a few schools offering that or extending that invite to look at the school itself and then have a meeting with the head teachers afterwards to discuss what you've seen. So we'll organise that.
Yeah, and Councillor Lowry, I haven't got your face. I can't see it again. I'm not sure whether you'd be interested in joining in attending.
Oh yes, I'd be
school.
very interested,
Sure.
Chair. Yes, please.
I thought you would. I thought you would be,
yes,
Alma.
absolutely. A teacher of 50 years experience, you can't keep me out of schools.
Absolutely, I knew you would. That's great. That's so.
Thank you.
We'll organise something for that, Caroline, and we take it from there. Okay. I just thought it was a really good topic. That really interesting. So we move on to the agenda. Agenda item number 6 is the Chief Executive's update. Tony, I can't see you, Tony. But can you hear me?
I can, Chair.
Yeah.
I can, Chair. Yeah. I think Gemma's going to share a slide. If you just bear with me for 1 minute, Chair, I just need to send an email to somebody just to say that I'm going to be late for the meeting. If that's okay. Just while Gemma's putting the presentation up. Otherwise, they're going to be sat waiting for me. Right, apologies for that, Chair. Okay, so fairly brief this month. I haven't got too much information for you this month, just a few slides. But I'll share those and then happy to take any questions. Can everybody see the slides okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can everybody see? Yeah, I think. Yeah.
All right, if you just move on, Gemma, just to
I
outline.
can't see the one on the right of it, so I'm sorry, Chair, but I can't see. You've got your big one there on the left, on the right. Are we supposed to be able to see that as well, Tony?
No, that'll come up
right,
next.
then.
That's
Thanks.
just the next slide. If we move on, Gemma, please. Gemma, can you move it on? We appear to be experiencing some difficulties, Chair. I'll start talking through the presentation and hopefully Gemma can move it on at some point. So today there were a couple of items that I wanted to just follow up on from last month's OSB. I wanted to cover the stuff that LMT talking about, the stuff that's occupying our time at the moment, and then just a little bit on upcoming executives.
Any questions, Tony, at the end of the year?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
and I'll make sure that I don't go along too fast. Given that there seems to be a problem with the presentation.
Gemma, Tony, would you like me to see if I can share it from my screen?
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think.
I don't know if Gemma can stop.
We need Gemma to stop sharing, won't we?
Yeah. Just click change presenter and see if it'll work for me. Is it coming up, Tony?
It is. Well done.
No worries.
Thank you. So if we just move on to the third slide, please, Caroline.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so I mean, we've just had a long discussion, which I hope was useful for you on school exclusions. There were some questions and some issues that were raised when I raised school exclusions at the meeting last week. Councillor McCabe had asked why previous scrutiny actually to update on school exclusion data had not been implemented. When we went and looked at that, the scrutiny meeting was actually in November. So the update to scrutiny is not actually due until May. And you've had a presentation today on that. So there's a little bit of miscommunication there. Councillor McCabe also requested a breakdown of permanent exclusion data to understand if there are any themes or issues. So Councillor McCabe has been provided that information. It demonstrates a rise in violence against teachers, as you've heard today, against other children and young people, resulting in permanent exclusions. And as you've heard today from both schools and other parts of the system, schools are challenged as part of the process. And as a result, something like 20% of potential exclusions have been overturned. And the exclusions prevention by the inclusion model continues to provide preventative interactions from those pupils that are struggling in the school environment. And then finally, Dorothy Davidson asked if the child is permanently excluded and moves to another school, whether the funding moves with them. And the answer to that is yes, the funding does move with that child. If we move on to the next slide, so LMT Hot Topics, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I'll talk about some, but not all of them. So we're looking at values and staff engagement and still sort of planning that piece of work around how senior management as a group and politicians as a group can kind of evidence the values in the way that they behave. Now that the strategic plan, work plan, so the strategic plan itself hasn't changed, but the work plan, the delivery plan for this year has been agreed. That was agreed at executive. We're getting into the discipline of milestone planning those and putting them into our programme and performance management framework so we can be really, really clear of how these things are going to be managed and delivered. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on that at the moment. Locality working is something we're looking at, and we're kind of going back to basics with that to look at whether or not we have delivered against the model that was approved at executive and what we've learned over the last 2 and a bit years of locality working as we look to extend that pilot to include the Hemlington area. Health and safety we're looking at, we know that there is a bit of a concern about assaults on staff, both verbal and physical. We've averaged about 1 a week for the last year. And John Armstrong, the health and safety manager, is back at LMT tomorrow with further information on that. As ever, loads of work on the town centre, whether it's the stuff that's going on in Captain Cook Square with the leisure developments, whether it's the office buildings that we've got at Centre Square, or whether it's the developments going on at Middlehaven. And you'll have seen, you know, quite recently that we've, it looks like we're going to get the TTE engineering facility into central Middlesbrough as well. And that's all good news for us, increasing footfall within the town. School exclusions, which you've heard about today. And we're into the closure of accounts process at the moment. And this is the closure of accounts for 2020, 2021. So it's somewhat delayed. But we are in significant discussions with the external auditors about their view around whether or not the council can demonstrate value for money. I think we're 3 or 4 weeks away, possibly, from them confirming what their opinion is, and for us then starting to produce what's called the annual governance statement, which goes to Corporate Audit and Assurance Committee, and we're doing a lot of work on completing that document now. Undoubtedly, within that document, as far as our governance system goes, there will be some improvements that are required to systems and process, as ever there is. But it's also likely that we will have an improvement section in that around culture and behaviour. And that's something that I'll probably be able to talk about in 3 to 4 weeks' time. And then we're starting to look at the budget again. So we need to look at the budget. At the moment, we've got a balanced budget. We're just checking at the moment how strong we think our the assumptions that have been made in the medium-term financial plan around house building are. It may be that they need to be revised down. If those figures are revised down, that would create a gap, and therefore we'll need to speak to executive about how that gap is closed. either through an increase in council tax above the 2% that's assumed in the MTFP at the moment, or cuts to services, or a mixture of both. But we're just starting that process, so we're not in the realms of saying that we haven't got a balanced budget, but we're starting the process as we always do at this time of year to make sure that we've got a load of time to properly identify what our medium-term financial position is, and if savings are required, how they can be achieved. So that's the stuff that's kind of occupying LMT's time as a team at the moment. And then finally, just upcoming decisions for executive. We've got the demolition of the former Slam nightclub. So that's the nightclub that's underneath the A66. Executives on May the 10th. So that needs to be demolished so that we can access some of the supporting columns for the flyover, because they need strengthening. So that decision will be made in May. Hopefully then we can demolish the Slam nightclub and get the strengthening work done. Year 2 action plan for the green strategy. So we launched the green strategy just over a year ago. Intention is that we become carbon neutral as a council by 2029 and as a town by a little bit later than that. So this is just a group of actions for the second year that move us along that. Really important report that's coming around improving our highways. So within the budget this year, there was provision for an additional £15 million worth of expenditure on dealing with potholes. So that was budgeted for within the medium-term financial plan and the budget that you voted through. We've undertaken a piece of work, and with that £15 million, we're confident that we can address all of the red areas and all of the high amber areas in terms of classification across the town. That will take 3 years to do. We'll need to commission some of the work, because if we specifically commission it, we can get savings. But that will lead to a programme of work that will start in this summer that will help us to deal with the state of the roads in Middlesbrough and make significant improvements to them over the next 3 years. There's also a report on setting up the residential pest control service. So again, this was something that was in the budget. This was there was an amount of money that was invested to create a subsidised pest control service for our residents. So Jeff's got a report there that just articulates how that will work. Probably take about 3 months to get it up and running, because we'll need to recruit. But I'm sure that's something that both residents and politicians will be happy to see. And then just got one more slide. There's an update on the cultural investment perspective. So the cultural partnership, which is over 20 organisations, talks about the funding that we've achieved. So over £4 million for Central Library, for example, how that's going to be spent. There'll be a request for us to move to phase 2 of the Tees Advanced Manufacturing Park, which has been a massive success. So as you come into the A66 towards Middlesbrough from the Stockton end, that's the suite of kind of grey and blue buildings that you see before you get to Cannon Park. We built them along with the combined authority. They're fully let. They're let at higher rents than we budgeted for. And so we want to move on to the next phase, because that's returning as a profit that's helping us avoid the need to make cuts and balance our budget. So we want to move on and get on with phase 2 of that. So that's coming to the next meeting. And then finally, 2 reports that were scheduled for me, but we've taken off. First was tree maintenance. So this is again about the budget that you approved and the increase in our ability to deal with the issues around trees. And that's because we just need a little more time to understand how far that work will allow, how far that money will allow us to go, and then to make amendments to the tree policy, so that we can so that we can deal with more tree problems across the town. So that's likely to come in July now. And then a report that was pulled yesterday when we spoke to informal execs. So bus lane contraventions. So there was a report that was looking for approval around the penalty charge levels for motorists who contravene bus lane restrictions. But statutory guidance has now come out, and what we were suggesting is completely in line with the statutory guidance. So there's no need for a political decision. So that report's been removed. And that's it for this month, Chair. That was relatively quick. I hope that was okay. Thank you.
It's fine, Tony. Yep. Have we got any members' questions? Chris, Councillor Hobson?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Tony, you mentioned the values and the staff and engagement with people. I'm a bit upset because the planning applications have been taken off sending out to members. And you know, I've been on to you about this before, where we're not getting the weekly planning applications that we used to get. What they're telling us now is that we actually need to go on to the website and find them ourselves. Well, I'm sorry, but for me, that's no good at all. I need the weekly planning applications. We haven't had them now for at least 3 months, maybe 4. And I know there's other councillors feel exactly the same about this. That all they need to do is press a button to send it out to us, and I can't see what the problem is. So please, can we have them back, and can we please not let people make decisions without it being discussed with the councillors? That's the important bit. If decisions are going to be made that is going to hamper what we do as councillors, then we need to know, and we need to have a meeting with people. Sorry about that. The other thing is about it's great about TAMP. Absolutely thrilled to bits. I know at the very beginning of this, I was a bit against TAMP, but actually it's taken off really well. I'm thrilled that it's ready to go to the next stage now, because I think that is one of the things that we can be very, very positive about. We've done a really good job on that. And the commissioning about the roads, please, Tony, if we commission the roads out to a firm, can we please have something where we can go back and say, this road was done 3 weeks ago, it's now got holes in it, we need it repaired again free of charge. Okay. So can we have some guarantee on what they do on the roads that it will last more than 3 weeks or a month? Sorry about the moan.
No, it's okay, Councillor Hobson. You know that I'm always happy to hear your concerns. On the first issue that you raised, I totally agree. We shouldn't be making changes without speaking to members first. On this particular issue, I've not been involved, so I'll need to take that away, find out what it is that's kind of driven a change in the process, and if we can do something to change it, then of course we will. So if you let me take that one away, and I'll come back to the next meeting with one. On the roads, we've done a piece of work. So the cost of dealing with reds and high ambers is probably about 19 million if we use our existing methods. But we're going to go out and specifically contract this piece of work rather than take it from an existing framework. And experience tells us from a piece of work that we've done recently that we will get that cheaper. But also within the quality aspect of that, we will be asking for a guarantee that repairs last for a certain period of time. And that certain period of time will be years, not months. We had this discussion yesterday, and the reason that a lot of the repairs that are made at the moment don't particularly last is just because of the sheer volume of potholes and work that we've got. And actually they're just being patched up. You know, it's a kind of a sticking plaster job, where what this will allow is, if you look at Hall Drive, a classic example, you know, that whole road needs resurfacing. It will allow us to do these things so that they should last for, you know, up to 10 years is our expectation. But that will be in the contract that we put out in the tender.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Is that okay, Chris? Yeah. You're on mute, Chris. I don't know.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that, Tony.
Councillor Davison?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now, Chair? Yes?
Yeah, fine,
Yeah,
fine.
Sorry,
fine,
I just had a bit of a difficulty there taking the mute off. Just with regards to locality work, and I think I mentioned it to you the last time, Tony, that our children and young people's scrutiny panel, we were looking at locality working. The report is nearly completed, and we're hoping to bring the report with the recommendations to OSB at the next meeting. So I would be pleased if you could look at those recommendations when you're looking at locality working. And also, can I just bring up very quickly with regards to the tree policy? Many wards have a nightmare with trees, and I wondered if certain councillors or all councillors could be considered to look at this tree policy as well and be brought into the decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Yeah, I'd love to see the recommendations on locality working as early as you can provide them, because it's something we're looking at the moment. So that would be great. And I'll take the question on the tree policy back to Jeff and see what we can do. It was part of the discussion yesterday that we had with the executive around the role that ward members should perhaps or could perhaps play in kind of determining which trees should be dealt with first. I'm sure there's a role somewhere. I'm sure that as ward members, you understand which trees are most important to have some action taken within your own wards. The problem is when we then try and prioritise across 20 odd wards. That is the issue. But I think it would be great if we could get, you know, some wider member involvement in the in the development of the revisions to the policy, perhaps through the relevant scrutiny committee. I don't know, but I'll have a chat with Jeff about that, and we'll see how we can take it forward.
Thank you for that. Can I just mention one other thing, Chair, please?
Okay, Dorothy. Yeah.
Thank you. It's with regards to my colleague Chris has mentioned roadworks, and I've got a mention to you with regards to Stokesley Road. Part of it was totally resurfaced and it's all back up again. There's big potholes there, and it's a main route into Middlesbrough. I do believe there's about 25,000 cars use that route a day, and I think it really needs to be looked at again. Thank you.
Thanks, Dorothy. Take that away.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Walker, Jeanette.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Tony. I'm just wondering regarding, sorry, regarding the pest control service. I really look forward to seeing that actually coming forward, because I do know that we get a lot of people in this time of the year as well with wasps and bees, etc., and also rats. I'm just wondering how quickly that will actually happen. I would like to see that as quickly as possible. And also regarding the tree policy, I mean, it's been mentioned a couple of times now. We've got a lot of trees in Hemlington and we get a lot of issues and problems. And I think I have for the last 15 years. That's one of the things that I had to take on board becoming a councillor. However, I've got an issue regarding when people take it upon themselves to actually cut down trees on our land, and we try for prosecution and we don't get backup from the police, etc. I'm just wondering what we can do about that, because I know personally, you know, one particular case where somebody cut down 7 mature trees, and nothing happened in the end. And I'm just thinking that we need to put in place something that will try and avoid situations like that. And I think it's something very important, because we're planting them, and unfortunately some people take it upon themselves to destroy them. So it's just a thought. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that away. And in terms of the pest control service, then I think we need to go out, we need to recruit, we need to get operatives in. So we're looking at probably going to be about 3 months for us to conduct the recruitment exercise.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just in relation with the recent decision with Natural England, and I think the planning committee is not meeting at the moment as a result of their actions, their interventions. Would it be possible if the planning committee still meets on a regular basis, should this situation take a long time? Because my concern is that there's going to be a massive backlog for the planning committee, and hence it will stop work. And I was thinking if the planning committee could still meet in the meantime, and then if decisions are passed, then it will be an officer delegation as long as it meets with Natural England's, if they're happy with Natural England's decision. And that's my concern. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Councillor Hubbard. I am aware of that, and it's not just an issue that affects Middlesbrough, of course. That it's an issue that affects all local authorities, and certainly across the Tees Valley, we're working together on that particular issue. to kind of see whether it becomes an issue that takes some sorting out and takes some significant time, or disappears relatively quickly. I'll ask Richard Horniman to have a look at the comments that you've made and what kind of response that we can provide, and you know, whatever we can do, then we'll obviously try and do.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor. Yep. Okay, Brian. Councillor Walker, Stefan.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question has been answered almost. It's just I'm happy that the tree issue in Middlesbrough is being given more attention. I know there's been more money allocated in the budget as well for the coming year for trees. My question really was, if the tree policy is looking to be amended, can Tony give any indication of like how? But it's probably more a question for executive. But then if members could be involved in that process, that would be really helpful. But I think Tony's answered that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Just as a little bit more information for you, Councillor Walker. So Jeff Field is currently undertaking an assessment around. So there's a capital and there's a revenue requirement, because if we're going to deal with more trees and have more gangs who deal with trees, then we obviously need more equipment. Those things have been sorted out. We know what the revenue is that we can dedicate to the particular task, and the number of staff that will buy. What Jeff is trying to work out is how much extra capacity that gives us in terms of dealing with issues, and then how that can be reflected in the policy. Because what we don't want to do is extend the policy in some way and create a demand that can't be satisfied by the additional resource that we've put in. So there's a bit of a balancing act at the moment that Jeff's going to go through. And yeah, you know, I think it would be good that, you know, the more people involved, the better generally on that.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Brian, Councillor Robert, you've still got your hand up there. I've lost your video, but you've still got your hand up. Have you got another question for Tony? He's froze up. He's froze up. I'll take it he hasn't, Tony. Thanks very much for that update, Tony. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. The Economic Development Environmental Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. Your final report, Councillor Stefan Walker. Do you want to present the final report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief. I've got a little script prepared though. Over the past year, the EDEI Scrutiny Panel were tasked to investigate the green strategy for Middlesbrough Council. Sorry, apologies. We have incorporated into each meeting a section where we've analysed the green strategy, and our full report from this analysis is then included as part of the reports pack that members have been given today. The nature of the report, focusing on green strategy, was prompted from various factors, but the main two factors are: one, the government has introduced a new Environment Act alongside this has set greenhouse target emissions, which are designed to make local authorities more climate resilient. And two, in 2019, Middlesbrough Council declared a climate crisis, and from this has set out an ambitious 10-year plan to get its green strategy fully robust and developed. So to summarise, our terms of references are: one, to examine the council's proposals to meet government targets for greenhouse gas emissions; two, investigate Middlesbrough Council's green strategy action plan, focusing on land use and wildlife, culture and communities, and sustainable transport; and three, identify examples of good practice that can be adopted by Middlesbrough Council. So within our report, each of these terms of reference has been explored in depth, with examples of topics and guests that our panel has had to explore them fully. The report that we've got today does contain a wealth of information from our scrutiny panel work over the past year, and the final result has been presented to OSB with 10 recommendations that can be found on pages 18 and 19 of the report. The subject nature of the report focuses on a topic which is constantly evolving, and our recommendations are then not overly prescriptive, and they're not overly authoritarian, but instead are generally recommending further analysis by the council. For example, in finding examples of good practice elsewhere, we had a council officer from West Bromwich Council, which gave the panel presentation a presentation of their outdoor solar market project. This project that they've got, it had an overlapping quality of both enhancing the green credentials of the council, but also feeding well with other council strategies, in particular having a better mix of retail and leisure in town centres. I'm happy to take any questions from board members on the report. As I said, there's 10 recommendations. They've all been listed in the report back that we've had today. And I'd like to thank my EDEI panel members and Susan Lightwing, who's the officer for that panel, for all the work that we've done over the past year. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker. Has anybody got any questions regarding that report? Can't see any hands up. So, as I say, Stefan, thank you very much for that report. We go to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the Scrutiny Chair's update. We go down the list. First is adult social care. Councillor Platt. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because it's been a long meeting today. The Adult Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel last met on the 30th of March. Frank Scully, the Director of Adult Social Care and Health Integration, provided the panel with an update regarding the integration of health and social care. The panel then continued with its investigation into the role of the voluntary and community VCS in supporting adult social care, with a focus on COVID-19 recovery. Representatives from Streets Ahead for Information and Recovery Connections attended to provide members with information regarding their experience of working through the COVID pandemic, the work undertaken with the local authority, and the potential next steps for the recovery phase. The panel also referenced for their review. The investigation will continue into June 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. Next on down the list is Councillor McCabe. Councillor McCabe obviously isn't here, so I'll give you a brief report on the Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel, which is held on Monday, the 25th of April. On the agenda, there was a special education needs disabilities further evidence. There's 2 representatives from the Discovery Primary Academy and the Ayrsham Primary School, which give updates on the work, how the schools work with the local authority to identify and support children with special needs. Also, there was an item on the school exclusion data update report, which we just all had that today. It was following the Scrutiny Panel's 2021 review of behaviour and discipline on bullying in schools. And it had been agreed that a comprehensive report of exclusions would be submitted to the Scrutiny Panel on a 6-monthly basis. The officers were there to present that update. Also, we had the education of COVID-19 recovery update by the Executive Director. Children's will provide that update. Thank you. Okay, we've got Councillor Dorothy Davis now, Children, Young People, Social Care and Scrutiny Panel. Dorothy?
Thank you, Chair. The Children and Young People Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel met on the 26th, which was yesterday. The panel considered 2 draft final reports, locality working from a children's service perspective and sufficiency and permanency perceptions of children in care. The panel considered and agreed the conclusions and recommendations in respect of both reports, subject to some amendments, which will be finalised by myself, the Chair and the Democratic Service Officer, and circulated to panel members for their final comments. Once these reports are finalised, it is intended that we hope to submit these 2 reports to the board at the next meeting on the 11th of May. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davison. Next is the Culture and Communities. Councillor McIntyre. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. The last meeting of Culture and Communities was held on the 7th of April, re food banks. First, I would like to share some figures with you for the 2021-22 year. 3,595 vouchers were fulfilled, adults 5,080, children 3,398, which made a total number of fed of 8,478. I would expect these numbers to rise as energy costs get higher. We were joined by Tracy Godfrey Harrison of Middlesbrough Food Bank, who said they were struggling to get food donations from Morrison's. We were also joined by Jeanette Savage and Martin Barker, who gave us info on what the council are doing. In April 2020, a new service was established, which has been excellent, and was established not only to help with financial assistance, but also with other support. The service is called the Resident Support Scheme, and all the officers involved with this should be highly commended for their hard work. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor McIntyre. The EDEI Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Stephen Walker.
Thank you, Chair. We met on the 6th of April. We originally had 2 agenda items. One we had to cancel because of sickness, and the other we had to cancel because it was commercially sensitive. So we used that time to go into depth on our final report and explore every recommendation that we wanted to actually present today. So that's what our meeting was focused on, and it was actually really useful. I sometimes find that reports are not always fully read, or we can compile reports that are done. A lot of work is done by council officers. So it was, as a panel, it was actually really useful just to have that meeting dedicated to fleshing out how we felt and what we wanted to say. So that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And we'll get back to Councillor Davison, Health and Scrutiny. Dorothy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. At the Health Scrutiny panel last met on the 5th of April, members received information relating to health and care bill and the potential impact on health scrutiny. One of the main impacts was the removal of health scrutiny ability to refer issues to the Secretary of State. While this function was seldom used in Middlesbrough, it has been used significant effect where it had. The panel also heard a scrutiny principle document had been drafted outlining how scrutiny could best work with the integrated care system to add richness to the understanding of local need. The panel were also updated on a recent Tees Valley Health Summit, during which updates were provided by TEWV and their improvement journey following their CQC inspection. Members also received the annual performance update from the North East Ambulance Service, which highlighted the pressures the service was under. The Director of Public Health advised the panel that in terms of COVID-19, infection rates were high, but official figures would begin to drop as the testing regime was scaled back. Members were advised that national policy was now learning to live with COVID-19, with restrictions such as legal requirement to self-isolate being removed. It was noted that due to the reduced testing, local intelligence had been reduced, although pop-up vaccination centres continued to see people. The panel's next meeting will be confirmed after the Council AGM in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Thank you. I'd just like to add, I know we have another OSB on the 11th of May, but I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all the chairs for doing such a tremendous job throughout the year, and not forgetting all the democratic officers who are absolutely unbelievable in the Susie and Carolina here at the moment, but all the scrutiny panel officers have done a tremendous job over the year. I've got Councillor Lowry's hands up, so
just a comment, Chair, on the culture and communities.
Okay,
yeah. It's just about the fact that we are witnessing an increasing need for food banks and for provision of food for people who are in really challenging circumstances. I don't know if as a panel, as an OSB, we can say how very saddened we are that people find themselves in such strained financial difficulties right now. I mean, that food bank situation and report reflects that so clearly. And given that we're going into more increased expenditure for families in terms of energy costs, etc., I feel I just need to say that that is a really, really sad situation. But many, many thanks for all the people working in the food banks to try and alleviate the distress that people are suffering right now.
Absolutely, totally agree with you, Councillor. Now we can note that.
Can I just come in there, Councillor Lally? You are spot on. It's so unfortunate that we need food banks, but now it looks like it's a fact of life. We have to have them. But everything you said is absolutely true. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And it's really sad that it has to be a fact of life, isn't it? It's even more poignant that it's a fact of life now in 2022, people living in such poverty.
Absolutely right.
Okay, thanks, Alma, for that. Very concerning. Okay, I'd just like to. There isn't any other urgent items. The time and date of the next OSB is the 11th of May at 10 o'clock. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this morning. I know it's been a long meeting, but it's been a very interesting meeting. Okay, can me and you, Caroline, have a little chat afterwards. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye, everyone.